Webcam microphone up close. Webcam microphone up close.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was a...
But I have the files. I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? The brain, final slap of choice, I don't know, computers, internet, professional wrestlers, and not Jesse Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the cartoon comes from, as long as it's real. It's hard to get real information, because seriously, they don't want you to have just read two together whenever I try to prove out one of these. It's not. If you expect your government to tell you the truth, you're going to be sadly disappointed on another one of these things.
Dear Lord, what a dirty, dirty old man, huh?
Really? Can't be serious. Is this really how you want things to be? Come on. More hooker, eruptions. Eruptions, whatever.
Like Dave Powers kind of...
Really?
Allegedly broadcast live from Pima Region 2, 3, within the borders of the formerly united and currently occupied states of America. We bring you the Ochelli Effect.
I damn sure know I'm an original. We have all these situations. I'd love to know why it takes 50 years, for...
That's that.
For a 19-year-old girl to eventually get up to gumption to put these things out.
Oh my, all that noise, and it is Saturday night on UCY.TV radio. This is the Ochelli Effect. Of course, I'm Chuck Ochelli, and I am live. So, tonight we're going to do something a little bit different. I have an author lined up who is a very interesting sort of writer, and I'm going to drop you guys some links in the chat to get you a little better acquainted with him, and hopefully we'll learn a few things. Let's see now. Also, I want to welcome all the listeners which are on... let's see now. You can catch us on the TuneIn app. You can catch us on, believe it or not, iTunes Radio does carry the UCY stream. Shoutcast, of course, if you're at the homepage, all that kind of good stuff. And if you're catching me downstream, thank you. But for the live audience, let's get to this, and hopefully everything works tonight. You never can tell, though, I'll tell you that much. And we're going to see about getting Daniel Lewis Crumpton in here in just a moment. Let's just see if the Skype is going to cooperate tonight. I'll tell you, and by the way, there's a couple of upcoming guests in the next few weeks. I'm going to have John Barber return. I'm going to have also return of Maria Heller. And Mr. Crumpton, you are on. You can... there we go. Okay, I don't have the kickback now. I was hearing myself for a second. But thank you for joining me tonight, sir. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for having me, man. I'm doing excellent. I'm down here in Panama City, Florida, watching the sun go down as we speak, enjoying a tasty beverage. And I had a friend, Vincent, I think he's a mutual friend of ours, that asked me to come on the show tonight to discuss the darker aspects of religion. And since he did, I've been sitting here wondering how we're going to wade into this lake or ocean.
Well, I'll tell you what, we'll just sit back and relax. You and I are in the same sort of area of the United States. I'm actually broadcasting from North Carolina, so we're looking at that same darkness starting to fall. So it'll set the mood perfectly, I think, sir.
Beautiful, beautiful.
So let's do this, though. Let's try and get the listeners a little bit familiar with you. You are a writer and also a producer for zeninthecar.com, right?
That's right. I'm one of the chief contributors and one of the chief editors of zeninthecar.com, which was a concept that was very far-fetched and caused me a lot of grief because, especially in the Bible Belt, you probably know this too, people do not want to talk about spirituality and they do not want to talk about politics. And it's my philosophy and the philosophy of everybody at zeninthecar.com that the two must be spoken about together because they are interrelated. They affect each other. So whenever the site launched 3 years ago. That was the elephant that we wanted to try to eat, which was how do you merge concepts of spirituality with political activism. So
it's very interesting that you use the idea of eating the elephant, because there's the African proverb which states that how do you eat an elephant? You eat it one bite at a time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's what you were referring to, right?
Exactly, and you have to eat it one bite at a time because, there are some people, especially in what's going on now with I don't know what you would call it, the liberty movement or the freedom movement, the truth movement. There's so many different terms. I think there's an awakening that is going on in this country and in this world. And people are, for the first time in a very, very long time, starting to look at the way that the world has been presented to us with new eyes. But it's strange because so many of us are at different levels in this movement. And you have to...
Right, and it's also a very tough sell, especially in the South, because, like you said, people are rather entrenched in their very sort of monolithic beliefs. You have to go to the church. The church is a community staple. It's a social staple. It's one of these things that, I just moved to the South personally. So I lived in New Jersey prior to this, and I'll tell you, spiritually, it's a different area. And, yeah, but it's still part of the East Coast, which, makes it a little bit different than, say, the West Coast, and I'm holding up air quotes right now, of course, on the radio, but what am I going to do? The fact is that there is sort of an expansion of the mind which is starting to happen. People are realizing that the reality may not be what they were always taught, but you're still confronted by that in certain areas of the country, for sure, and other parts of the world as well, where the institutions, which are generally thought of as the standard, let's just say, for the society, are being challenged to some degree. And this does cause a lot of sort of angst among the people that control a lot of these smaller communities. So I can see where you're coming from with this. And you're very right. There is an increase in the level of awareness and an increase in the sort of opening of people's minds and the opening of their hearts in a way that is unique to this time period, at least in my lifetime. I was born in the 70s, and, boy, how things have changed since then.
Right. Mm-hmm. And see, the thing about it is, Chuck, I know especially with me, you have to be careful what circles that you're in, how much information you can drop at a certain amount of time, because you can quickly, in the wrong circles, drop a piece of information that is light years beyond what the person you're talking to has conceived, that you'll get labeled a heretic, you'll get labeled insane. They'll slap all these labels on you because they're just not ready for it. They haven't acclimated to the ideas where, some of us are at. Some of us are well beyond others, and it's almost like there's a quote that I love that I see on Facebook all the time, is that we're all walking each other home. But, I call him Yeshua, people call him Jesus, but Yeshua said, be careful not to throw your pearls before swine, lest they turn and rent you. And I don't know personally if you've experienced that, but, I personally have experienced several occasions where you drop a pearl too quick and people quickly turn on you. And, that's one of the, like with the website at zenonthecar.com, how do you eat an elephant? You have to do it one bite at a time. So we're trying to build year by year on the information that we're giving to our audience.
And I got to say that, just personally, so I'm not a Christian. However, I do believe that that the story that is there, the entire arc of the story, is valuable and is based on various other stories. It seems to me as though there's sort of a weak sort of evidence for the historical, Jesus. However, there was an individual that definitely existed during that time, I believe. Now, as for the historical accounts, this is where it does get a little bit strange, because we're relying on, documentation which is written from a certain perspective.
Right.
And this is always questionable, and I personally question all history that is presented to me at this point, because I do realize that it has a lot more to do with the perspective of the author in a lot of cases, more than the reality of the events. And so now to say this to someone who is, a believer, does cause you a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
But this doesn't mean that that I'm against one's beliefs. I have friends that are devout Christians,
Right.
and I see no problem with that whatsoever, so long as they are not allowing themselves to be controlled by the church. Because you see, the teachings of Christianity are different than some of the churches.
Right.
And so, therefore, that's how I view it personally. And I wanted to disclose that to you just right away.
No, you're fine. Me and you would probably see more eye to eye than you possibly could imagine. I don't really try to go by any titles, and I do not believe in religion, period. I believe in spirituality. I believe, this is an elephant, man.
It's okay.
I believe
one bite at a time. We'll get it.
One bite at a time. Here's essentially, if you had to boil down my belief structure, I find great value from the Holy Bible. I'm like you. I question some of the historicity of it. I question some of the books that were deleted intentionally. But I do believe that the book is inspired. However, what most people who would define themselves as any particular religion or religious title, what they tend to do is they tend to exclude other people's perspective. If you were to pick up the Bhagavad Gita, you'll find that it's telling the same story in different beautiful words. And there's a word in the Hindu faith that's namaste, which means, essentially it means the divinity that is within me recognizes and bows to the divinity that is within you. Okay? Well, when you go to Christianity and you use their terms, basically, Jesus said that the law and the prophets, or Yeshua, he said the law and the prophets hang on these two. Love God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. Now, that's the same thing. It's just in different expressions. Salam in Islam means the same thing. But what organized religion tends to do is condition us to look at the differences amongst the faiths to divide us. And, you divide and you conquer. But what organized religion doesn't do is teach us to look for the similarities, and there are so many. In Hinduism, you'll have the word karma. What you put out into the universe is what comes back to you in the universe. In Christianity, you have Yeshua saying, you reap what you sow. It's the same concept. It's just different words,
Oh, right. I used to say that, we're all talking to God. It's just that we all call him different names, but we're still all talking to the same guy,
Of course.
It's a really simplified sort of way to look at it, but I was a kid at the time I first uttered that statement, and I got to tell you, it still makes sense. So I hear what you're saying.
Right, and really, my personal belief is that organized religion is heavily steeped in fear-based trauma, to put you in a negative energy, to feel guilty. In Catholicism, what do? They hold up an image every Sunday or every Mass of a man on a cross, that's bleeding, and okay, there's evidence that there was a historical Yeshua who was crucified. That the details are a little sketchy on what the church would say.
Right.
But there obviously there was a man who walked that path. But you're getting shown this image on a regular basis, which immediately puts you in a negative energy, because they're telling you that he's on that cross because of you. It's your fault. You did it. Because you were born a dirty, rotten sinner. Okay. In your mother's womb. God had to murder his only son. Now, that's, if you stop and think about how kind of sick that is, and to say that simply by the act of being born, God had to kill his only son and it's your fault, so you better do exactly what we tell you to do, is, to me, it's a little asinine, because that is not the message from the Bible or from any other scripture that I can glean. To me, what I really believe is that if your spirituality is not bringing you to a place of peace and allowing you to coexist in a world with differences of other people, then it's no good and you need to throw it away. But that's me.
I hear you. You know what? Let's back up just a little bit, because I would like to get out a little bit about you. How long you've been writing? What else have you done? I mean, we're going to talk about Along Came the Flood. I believe that's the title, right?
Then Came the Flood.
Then Came the Flood. Excuse me.
Right.
And I only read a brief sort of summary about it, and part of an interview you did about it. So but I will get into it some more. But I wanted to find out just a little bit about you real quick. Whatever it is you'd like to explain about yourself, or other things you've worked on, or whatever it is that you think listeners would need to know.
Sure. Most of my work is at ZenInTheCar.com. I produce Zen in the Car TV with Jason Patrick, Sabrina Black, Curtis Sermons, and Jason Turner. We call him Turner Von Publius, a friend of the people. Typically, what we do there on the show is show how to perform activism and how to deal with trigger-happy police, in a proper way without getting shot. And that's on YouTube. It's also on the website, ZenInTheCar.com. We produce that. We typically go on a break every year around this time so that all of us can kind of recharge, and that's what we're going to be doing soon. I also needed time to work on the novel. But I've been writing. I came out of my mother's womb with a quill in my hand. I've been writing since I was a kid. Written several novels that haven't been published yet because I'm a perfectionist. Then Came the Flood was published last year, and that was published by Wespo Press, which they were fantastic. Absolutely fantastic, and I was actually quite amazed that they were willing to take on the controversial nature of the novel. Very, very amazed, because Wespo Press is owned by Thomas Nelson, and Thomas Nelson is owned by Zondervan, which is one of the biggest Christian publishing houses in the world, and they really stepped out on a limb with my story, and they did an excellent job with the production of the novel, with the design, with all of it. I couldn't be more satisfied with the publishers. And
the graphic art looks great, by the way. It's really kind of epic looking.
It's Gustave Doré. I'm a huge fan of Gustave Doré. There's so many other images. I'm actually, for the sequel to the novel, I'm going to use another Gustave Doré image in front of the Tower of Babel. That's a little teaser. That's actually Paradise Lost number 5, I think, is what that illustration was. But they did that. I chose the cover photo, and they did the rest of it, and they just did a fantastic job. But essentially, what the novel, how it was conceptualized was, this kind of ties into what we were talking about earlier. One of the things that organized religion really doesn't want most of its lay people to do is expose themselves to knowledge, other knowledge. They kind of put it into you that God won't be happy if you research alternative history, or perhaps if you look at maybe how the Bible was compiled, or how certain, why certain beliefs. They don't like you to do that. And I've always been rebellious by nature. But what really kicked off the book was there is a story in Genesis chapter 6. And most Orthodox Christians kind of brush over it, but it's this phrase that says the sons of God saw the daughters of men, right? And there's the mainstream view of that passage is that you had the godly line of Seth and the ungodly line of Cain. And that essentially what this is talking about is ungodly people falling in love with godly women, and then there's a perversion. However, if you look elsewhere in the Bible, when the term sons of God is used, it's referring to angelic beings. And
right, and there's also just I mean, I hate to interrupt you, but there's a lot of misreadings that occur as far as what the typical canon of knowledge is. Let's just say in the mainstream of Christian culture about a lot of things. The Book of Genesis is loaded with them. For instance, when they're discussing Adam and Eve, they're not the only people on the planet if you read it correctly, because it says that they were the first people in the garden.
Right.
Okay, but there were others that were there. If you read it just exactly right, you understand that there's others there.
Right.
Now, they were forged and they were given paradise. I understand that based on the story. But, of course, there are other things which were left out, other things which were not canonized into the, what is accepted as the Holy Bible at this point. There's a story which exists previous to that where Lilith is Adam's original wife and all of that.
Exactly. Yes.
And you actually touch upon in this book here. I know at some point you touch upon the Book of Enoch, which is also rather fascinating. And
yes, I touch on Lilith as well. She's in the book. What really inspired it was when I started researching. Okay, well, how do we get the canonized version of the King James? I prefer the King James because it's beautiful language, for one, and there's more text. And whenever you go back and you do your research, and Constantine supposedly converted and turned the Roman Empire into a religious organization, and they had the Council of Nicaea.
Right.
And one of the litmus tests for what was to be canonized was, well, I think the first goofy thing was they were going to put all the scrolls, that we're now finding from the Nag Hammadi Library and from the Valley of Qumran in 1947, the Gnostic Gospels, was they were going to put all the scrolls underneath the table, and whichever ones jumped on the table, that was going to be canonized, and that didn't work out. So their next litmus test was, okay, if Yeshua quoted from it, or if any of his disciples quoted from it, it was to be included. Okay?
Mm.
Well, there's a passage I believe it's in the book of Jude, if memory serves me correct, but I know that Paul quotes from it and Yeshua quoted from it, and it was, he will come back with 10,000s upon 10,000s of his angels. All right, well, Yeshua quoted from it, and according to the Council of Nicaea, that meant that wherever that was referenced was supposed to be in the canon. But if you search the entire Old Testament, you will not find that phrase anywhere.
Right.
It's only found in the Book of Enoch. Only. So at that point, my question, the top of my head just popped off, and I go, wait a second. If this extra biblical book has this passage in it, and Yeshua, Jude, Paul, and Peter quoted it, why did the Council of Nicaea leave the book out? Why did they do that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it got me to do a lot of research into the character of Enoch, who we know is one of two characters that never died. They were directly taken up to heaven. And so it eventually led me to the Book of Enoch. And any of your listeners, if you have not read the Book of Enoch, do yourself a favor. There's free versions online. You can go down to your local bookstore and pick it up. When you read it for yourself, you will know why somebody did not want that book canonized. Because there's information in that book that completely changes your perspective on the biblical account of creation, of hybridization, of supernatural influence in our world. And thank goodness that, now with the internet, people can have access to this so that they can maybe relook at the biblical account, through that lens. And after I read it, it completely transformed my world. And it opens up this story that's only briefly mentioned about in Genesis 6 about the sons of God.
Right.
And it talks about basically a hybridization of angelic beings Now, it depends on who you ask. Some people say that this band of angels, the Watchers, as they're called, they were just supposed to be kind of like monitors of mankind. They weren't supposed to interfere, kind of like Star Trek, the Prime Directive. Some people believe that they were under the command of who we would call Lucifer. Other people believe that it was just a completely separate band. Mm-hmm. But it opens the story up of these guys coming down and creating hybrids with human women.
Yeah, and so this gets into the odd sort of, interpretation, let's call it, where they start talking about these choirs of angels and all this stuff, which is based on the Judeo-Christian sort of meld together of the angelic lore. But the Watchers actually pre-exist any of those writings. The idea of the Watchers might actually be very separate, because we have a completely incomplete book here.
Right.
And this is one of the possibilities that arises if you read the Book of Enoch, right?
Exactly, and it not only does it tell you that most Christians believe that the Earth is 6,000 years old, which I don't even want to get into that. Okay.
Look, I understand.
I don't want to get into that.
Yeah.
Because that is a whole ball of worm or wax.
Wax and worms, probably so.
Wax and worm, yeah. If you're going to sit here and tell me that the Earth is 6,000 years old and God created everything on the first day, when did Lucifer fall? There was history before that. There was, if you really, well, to me, it even gets into what people would call extraterrestrials, which extraterrestrials and angels are the same thing. You're just using different words. An angel is not from this planet. You know what I mean?
Exactly, and you could very easily sort of apply the characteristics that are often ascribed to angels to extraterrestrials. This is very possible if you just sort of take a step back and you don't go with those preconceived notions that you're given. Even the crucifixion itself changes a little bit if you look at what could be called, if it did exist in the King James Version at this point, the Book of Judas would change your perspective even on the crucifixion itself. All of these things. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Whenever you get to the book of Ezekiel, and it talks about the wheels within the wheels, I'm sorry, but that reads like a blueprint for that's technology. That's technology that's being utilized to allow the cherubim to transport. But I don't understand why most people in organized religion don't see that connection. They just, I don't know how maybe their imagination isn't as vivid as mine.
Well, I don't think it's a matter of imagination. I'm going to tell you why. There's a lot of misinterpretation, not just, let's put religion aside for a moment, okay? The archaeological and anthropological discoveries that have occurred, and I was discussing this week actually with a wholly different guest about the technology of ancient Egypt, okay? Just as an example, okay, I'm not even saying that that's all we got to focus on, but if we can just imagine that a great deal of these things that we're finding now in these so-called ruins from many centuries ago were actually things that we don't fully understand, and you sort of reinterpret what it is you're looking at, it changes your entire perspective on the historical text. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, yeah. So, essentially, and like I said, to any of your listeners, go and pick up the Book of Enoch, and I wouldn't even stop there. The Gospel of Truth, which was found in the Nag Hammadi Library, is excellent. It's kind of like Proverbs with Yeshua just, giving out knowledge. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene. Don't restrict yourself to the 66 books that the church has said is, that's it. You really have to look at how the Bible was canonized. But, after I did...
That was actually the word I was looking for about Judas. I think it was actually titled The Gospel of Judas. You can find it under that title as well.
Right. And there's a good book by, I think his name is David Ehrman. It's called The Lost Scriptures, which compiles all the Gospels that were found in the Nag Hammadi Library. And when I first read this book, that along with a book by Tal Malachi, or Malachi, called Living Gnosis, which basically, tells the secret teachings of Yeshua. Most people in organized really don't believe that Yeshua had secret teachings, and he did. There were. He said when the disciples came and they said, "Why do you teach in parables?" And he said, "Because it's not for them to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven. They're not ready for it." So there is an inner teaching and an outer teaching that Yeshua had. And whenever you kind of go into that world and you really dive into it, you find out that the reason that there was inner teachings and outer teachings is because it was great power that was in it. And we all know that there are some men who want to take advantage of other people. Men want power, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. And knowledge, the application of knowledge is power. So if you can conceal it, or you can edit it, or delete it, you can gain power over the masses. And, that's one of the problems of the world that we're in right now. So what I wanted to do with the book was, I said, well, okay, I'm a fiction writer for the most part, and a commentator, I guess. People learn through fiction much quicker, and it sticks much better than if you were to write like a technical manual. And I wanted to get this information out to people. So I said, okay, well, here's what I'll do. Like whenever you go back to the Book of Enoch, what you find out is that whenever these watchers cohabitated with the daughters of men, because of the mixing of the DNA, you came out with what's called the Nephilim, or the Earthborn. And now Roman and Greek mythology starts to make a little bit more sense. How you can have satyrs and 33 feet tall giants. And if you go back to Jewish antiquity and read some of the stuff in the Talmud about the antediluvian world, which is the world before the flood, it was a fantastical place. And this research just enthralled me. So I said, well, the best way for me to get it out is to write a fiction story and weave in the truth.
And the other interesting thing there, and I'm sorry to cut you off again, but another interesting thing that starts to make more sense is the Roman and Greek mythology and the sort of local practices that existed with it, where they believed that gods came down from Olympus or wherever and actually would impregnate women. And things like this, and all that seems rather crazy when we're talking about, Zeus comes down and you're actually, a son of Zeus, and you've been a son of Hermes or whatever else. This starts to make a lot more sense, though, if you can put it into a different context. That which they would have seen as gods are also seen as angels, are also seen as messengers of God, and so on and so forth, and then it all sort of falls into harmony with one another, and makes it really interesting that, like I said, despite the different tellings of the stories here, we actually have a harmony between them.
Right. There is an underlying story that has been deliberately encoded in all the world's beliefs and in all the world's religions. There is an ultimate truth that has been skewed. For, at the end of the day, it is for means of control. But yeah, so in the Book of Enoch, you have the Watchers on Mount Hermon, and then in Roman and Greek mythology, you have the Olympians from Mount Olympus. Mm-hmm. And whenever you read the stories of Gilgamesh, we're starting to see that there's a common story that's being told around the world.
Right. I was going to go to Gilgamesh next, actually, because that story falls very much in line, again, with the entire story arc of the historical, or the character of Jesus, all the way from, I believe even the virgin birth is reproduced in that story as well.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's what I was saying earlier, was we're taught to look for the differences in our different beliefs, but they're all interconnected. And with the book, what I wanted to do was to plant that seed in the minds of the readers, and so I do a little bit of mixing of, it is heavily based in the Christian mythos, or the Christian Old Testament world, but it does introduce characters like Prometheus. It does introduce, it uses, what's the word I'm looking for? It uses references to the Roman Olympians, to characters from, the Hindu Bhagavad Gita, to try to show people that there's one story, and because of, I guess, the language barrier, and because we as a people, as humanity, spread across the world, this story, it's kind of like Indian Whispers. You remember playing that when you were a kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
You start off saying one thing, and as it passes through the different years, it ends up as something completely different. But even when it does, you can still find a common essence to the original story.
Yeah, and some people might call that game telephone. You'll find that there is some remnants of the original, the original statement, but by the time you get to the end of the line, it has definitely changed. And being that, especially in a lot of parts of the ancient world, writing and things like this were kind of limited in a way. You had a lot of spoken word interpretations, and when languages changed, and of course translations changed, I mean, we still have difficulty with that to this day.
Right.
Which probably leads into your next novel. But since Tower of Babel, I mean,
the next one is going to be, oh goodness, I don't know if I want to talk too much about it, but it is going to talk about there's references in the Bible that would indicate, well, for one, the whole purpose of the flood was to eradicate the earth of this race that had been created, these demigods, like, Hercules and these half watcher or half god, half man beings who were decimating the earth. That's what the book of Enoch says. It says that they were just totally destroying earth. So God had to cause a global flood. However, when you get to the parts in Exodus and Leviticus and things like that, you find that when the Israelis get into the Promised Land, there's still Nephilim there. There's, Goliath, right? So the question is, okay, well, if God flooded the earth, how did they survive? Mm-hmm. So that's probably one of the main concepts that's going to be in the sequel to the novel. But you guys will have to wait and see.
Yeah, but even so, that's an interesting point, because there wouldn't be the story of David and Goliath if there had not still been these giants, these superhumans. So, I mean, that's just a real simple way to sort of put it. But there's a bunch of references actually to these, like, say, superior men that end up being more intelligent than the rest, that end up living longer than the rest. That end up being go ahead.
Whenever Joshua was sent into the land to spy it out, if you remember, they had to carry these grapes back that were as big as bowling balls. So there was also hybridization of produce, in the Holy Land. And, these questions pop up. Well, so I find it a fascinating topic to explore, and I can't wait to just jump into it and start pumping that book out to try to explain how that could have happened. And to tell you the truth, if you really want to know, I believe that this gets into a little more esoteric, but I believe that it is very, very obvious from everything that we know that at some point in human history there was a tampering of genetics. Mm-hmm. You can believe that it was a tampering of genetics from however you want to understand off-worlders. But I believe that there's still probably a strain of that left here on this earth. And I think that's a good reason why this information is popping up right now and more people are being exposed to it.
Well, not only that, but I mean, there is also the continuous references to, certain divine acts or magical acts, which occur throughout the text. And even more so in some of the Gnostic texts, you'll find a lot more of this stuff. And in a lot of cases, it was really a better understanding of knowledge, let's just say, of the natural world. And there was a higher intelligence. There was an ability to utilize stones to create certain effects and things like this. Again, something discussed in the context of Egypt, but Egypt was not unique there were many ancient societies that had a greater grasp of the natural world, let's just say, and it's one of those things that was kind of lost on so-called modern man, in my opinion. And you're right, there is a reawakening of this type of knowledge, and the understanding that that the whole world is made up of a great many different energies. Now, what I find kind of disturbing, though, and I don't know what you want to say about this. I'm just throwing this at you, and I hope I'm not putting you too much on the spot. But, the idea that nowadays a lot of people feel that because we are, again, poisoning the earth, with things like radiation, with other sort of destructive elements that have been unleashed upon our environment, our earth, our world, our fellow creatures, that we are again approaching a time when this type of catastrophe could occur, and I wonder what you have to say about those sort of, I don't know how to categorize them all, but there are many sort of different storylines there that people follow, and I guess we could say they're sort of doomsday kind of prophets in a way, sort of looking at the idea that we may again incur such a flood. We may again incur such a problem on this planet. And is that something that that you address also in your novel?
Not in the novel, no. But I will tell you my personal opinion on it.
Okay.
The beautiful thing is that's really up to each and every one of us. I have a friend, his name is Jesse Harriet. He's also an author who just published his novel about spirituality. And he often says there is no spot where God is not. Where can you go where God does not exist? So, from my perspective, that means that everything that I can possibly see or come in contact with is the consciousness of God. Everything. Everything has God's consciousness. And when I use the term God, I don't mean a bearded dude, in a throne. God is not a male, it's not a female, it's both. It's the divine masculine, the divine feminine. Mm-hmm. So, in my personal belief, I believe that not only are we conscious, but plants are, animals are very conscious, but so are stars and so are planets. They all have an essence, a soul. And I believe that the earth that we all live on is conscious as well. And I believe she's female. Mother Earth.
Right.
She's got to be, right? Come on, got to be. But
we could go off on that for a bit if we wanted to, but
yeah,
let it go.
Yeah. But we're interconnected with that consciousness, and I think that it's our own thoughts and feelings that are going to determine that. The thing, like with organized religion, excuse me, is if you can convince a mass amount of people to believe that there's going to be this atomic war, and that's the only way that Yeshua or whatever Messiah is supposed to come back is going to come back, then humanity as a whole will make sure that happens. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. When most people go to a psychic or a clairvoyant, they don't really realize that what a psychic or a clairvoyant is actually doing is putting subliminal messages in their mind to follow a certain path. Like if I were to tell you tomorrow to notice the number 333, okay, that's already in there. You're going to start looking for 333 all over the place, and you're going to find it, and then you're going to come back to me, and you're going to go, oh, you're psychic. Well, I put that in there, right?
Well, right, and so, to do this on a massive scale, what happens here is if you tell people that, basically Armageddon must occur in order for the world to be saved, then you're bringing it about, because if you convince enough people, they will make sure that those conditions exist, because after all, that is the part of the divine plan.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And you know what? You were very right to say that you and I probably come very, very close to believing the same things, because you very much stated pretty much what my view of the world is, which is that all things are alive, All things that are alive are definitely interconnected with one another. And there is something like a group consciousness. Some people refer to it as the Christ consciousness, what have you. And I believe that in essence, we are all, in one way or another, part of the same, very much the same sort of fabric in the universe.
Sure we are.
Some of us are slightly closer to one another on that large, fabric quilt, let's just say, than others are, but we are still all interconnected, and we are also interconnected with all the other living things. You can only derive life from life. You can only derive sustenance from life. It is that simple. So it just seems to me as though that just makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's apparent. It's obvious. Like, for example, if you ever come across anybody who's has a phobia, like of dogs, they always attract dangerous dogs to them, right? Mm-hmm. But when you eliminate yourself of that fear, then that frequency that you're sending out resonates back, But yeah, getting back to the doomsday prophecy, the beautiful thing about self-fulfilling prophecies is right now we since it's really, really escalated since 9/11, unfortunately, especially in this country, people have been so traumatized with that and didn't really examine what was going on that they feel there is this holy war going on. And it is bringing about, people are acting in a way, like the situation with Israel and all of that, people are bringing this cataclysmic event. So the beautiful thing about that is, okay, people like you and myself know that. Well, we understand that society as a whole is living out a self-fulfilling prophecy. So our job, even if we're in the minority, and it does look that we are that way for right now, but it's changing. Our job is to implant a different self-fulfilling prophecy into the mainstream, and that is that it doesn't have to come to a cataclysmic end, that we can change this, and we can keep it from going hot. This country, especially since 9/11, has been just on the very, very verge of a hot revolution. And I thank the divine every day that it hasn't happened. And I think that it's because of people like you, myself, and the guys at Zen in the Car, and people who are in our community. We're keeping it at bay. And, I talk a lot about divine providence. And then none of us are meeting by mere chance. None of us are coming together by mere coincidence. It's this group. I know probably with your show, you're finding people who are like-minded but are talented in different areas. And I'm a big comic book geek, but it's almost like the X-Men. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. We're all gifted in these certain areas, and we're having to figure out how we're going to operate as a team effectively to keep this world from becoming a wasteland. And I'm an optimist, and I believe that we're going to do it. I believe that we're going to win. And, according to some ancient scriptures and stuff that's in Egypt and stuff on a Mayan calendar, I'm right. So I'm an optimist, and I always tell everybody, no, we're going to stop this. We are going to stop this in its track. This planet has seen so much death and devastation over stupidity for so long that humanity as a whole will not tolerate it happening anymore. And that's me.
And we are entering into a new age very shortly here.
Already did.
Which is something that a lot of people do fail to recognize. They believe that, in a lot of cases with these doomsday prophecies, that we are at the end times. We're not necessarily at the end times. We're at the end of an age, though. And this is where the change is really in our hands. As far as I'm concerned, there is a holy war on, but it's not the one that they told you about. Right. This one is really for your minds and for your souls. And what's happening is, if you decide that you're going to be destructive, that you're going to do combat with everything around you, then you are contributing to that dark end. That is where you're going. And there will be some darkness. There can be no light without it. But the point is that we do have a choice. If enough of us stand up and enough of us speak from our own voices and we speak together, we can resist this very dark change. At least this is my opinion. And I'm hearing that you're very much of the same sort of mindset than I am.
Exactly. Now, personally, I know there's different opinions on what happened on December 21st, 2012. Some people don't believe that we entered the age of Aquarius, that we're not going to enter it for another 100 or so years or whatever, but no. The Freemasons, the Founding Fathers, and every other ancient culture has inscribed that date almost blatantly, so that we would take note to December the 21st, 2012. And essentially, what my research has led me to is I'm a solar gazer. People think you're not supposed to look at the sun, and the Egyptians, people thought they worshiped the sun. However, if you solar gaze at about an hour after the sun comes up in the morning and an hour before it goes down, it stimulates your pineal gland, your third eye, to produce what more dimethyltryptamine. Essentially, what happened? You have this mechanism in your head, and if all your listeners, if they could do this right now, if you could picture the eye of Ra, right? You have this eye, and then two separations that are coming off of it. The Egyptians were trying to tell us something, and this goes right to the Bible where Yeshua says, "If thine eye be single." He didn't say eyes. He said, "If thine eye be single, thy whole body will be filled with light." Well, if we were to take your brain, and this also has to do with human evolution, I believe. Darwin was wrong about it taking millions of years. Evolution does happen, but it happens in a split second. It just takes a few million years for it to happen. But if you stare at the sun, it creates in what's called the optic thalamus in the middle of your brain an oil or a wax that's called the Christos or the Krishna or the Christ. Right? It gets a shock of electricity and magnetism from the pineal gland and the pituitary gland, and then this Christ goes down the 33 vertebrae of the human body. It goes down into Galilee. Right? We're starting to see a connection here.
Yep.
That's why a lot of these secret societies love the number 33. It's why Yeshua was crucified at 33. It's the 33 vertebrae in your back. Now, most people asceticize their body through smoking, eating too much meat, alcohol, stuff like that. They asceticize. When this oil gets down into the sacrum, which is just in front of the coccyx, it's ruined. The oil is spoiled. But if you alkalinize your body, take a lot of vitamin nutrients, breathe, do yogic breathing, stare at the sun, this oil can actually raise back up through the 33 vertebrae. And you have ganglion nerves in your spine. The Hindus call them chakras, but they're there. You can ask any doctor. They're there. They're electrical hubs. Most people stay in base, which is, the navel below, which connects you to the earth, makes you materialistic. But if you can get this oil to rise up to your heart chakra, and if anybody's ever seen a picture of Leonardo da Vinci painting Jesus or Yeshua, he's always pointing to his heart, right? And his right hand is always ascending, right? So if you can do this process, the Hindus call it the Kundalini rising, Buddhists call it enlightenment, Christians call it salvation. It's the same thing. It's this process of alchemy within the body. If you can get this oil to your heart chakra, it then gets a second jolt of electromagnetism from the pituitary and the pineal gland and goes to the base of the skull, or Golgotha, which is where Yeshua was crucified, right? And where's your heart? Your heart is right where your arms would be outstretched. Well, you have a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere, and there's something in the middle called the arachnid web, or the veil. And typically, most people are traumatized under the age of 6 years old, and that shuts all your energy off to the left hemisphere of your brain. which is, you can only use 10% of it. If you can manage to get this oil or this Christos back up to your heart chakra where it gets crucified, it actually rips the veil in between the left and the right hemisphere, and then the electricity or the energy from all your ganglion nerves goes to the right hemisphere, where you can use 90. Left is male, it's logic, aggression. Right is female, it's intuition and access into the spirit world. Mm-hmm. What happened on December the 21st, 2012, and this is on the back of your $1 bill. You just do like a YouTube search of, the decoding of it. Is that the sun, for the first time in 26,000 years, started vibrating at a certain frequency that we haven't experienced on this planet since what we would call the Golden Age or Atlantis. And now we have an opportunity to where if people start to do this practice, which is, stare at the sun about an hour after it comes up or an hour before it goes down, typically bare feet on the grass, then you will stimulate more of that oil. And that's we were talking about, this great awakening. That's what people are discovering. And all you have to do, if you know anybody who's Spanish, ask them. They know. They've been staring at the sun for centuries. Mm-hmm. And it's this process of an internal awakening to where we can be more sensitive and more intuitive to the consciousness that links all of us together. And I think that for the first time in 26,000 years, we had been under the galactic ecliptic, and that day we actually started to ascend. And what most ancient texts say is that we're entering into a new golden age, where these things that have been binding humanity down are just falling away because all of us are waking up. If people like you and me keep talking in a generation, how many people's minds can we change to where we get enough people to say war is probably the biggest waste of time for our species, So
right, yeah, absolutely, and there is again a harmony, between a lot of the ancient beliefs again about this. They teach, different, as you mentioned, in the Indian culture, there's a great many different techniques that they teach you about your breathing and about the positioning of the body and yoga and all that. There are even, what they call pagan beliefs, which have now been very much watered down and commercialized. But there is a great deal of meditation techniques, and again, the diaphragmatic breathing, the sort of raising and the controlling of one's ability to circulate the blood through the body and all of that, which allows exactly what you're talking about, which is that change in the brain. And this is exactly something that has, again, it's one of those things that continuously was handed down, and I'm so amazed that I've actually got somebody who's aware of all this, because most people really aren't, and a lot of people think that when you discuss, sort of esoteric things like this, that, it's just very kind of kooky and new agey, and
they're not ready for it. And the reason that they're not ready for it is, whenever you were a kid, and you would look in the closet and you would see shadows, and your imagination makes a monster or, whatever, a creature. And then you scream for your mom and your dad, and they come in and they turn on the light. And once they've illuminated you to, that's just your jacket, that's just your shirt. And you go, oh, okay. So my imagination, because I didn't have full illumination on what I was looking at, I became afraid. And so many people are afraid to looking into these concepts because their church told them not to do it, their pastor told them not to do it.
Right, and they start calling it, they start, kind of applying sort of very, let's just say, malevolent kind of labels to it. They call it black magic, or they call it witchcraft, or they call it all these different things, when it is merely you utilizing your natural body to a better degree. And
right.
Yeah, and this is one of those things, but it is fearful because here's the problem. When people become more self-aware and when people become, a bit more developed or evolved, and I do use that term very guardedly, but when people become more evolved, it is much more difficult to control them.
Right.
And this, for me, is my largest argument with most of the mainstream organized religions, is that I see the control mechanism, is what I see. I do see the good lessons in a lot of cases, but I also see exactly like what you're talking about, that trauma-based programming, that fear-based, behavioral governance that is handed down. And in a lot of cases, it's politically tainted, and it's also tainted by the, let's just say, the collective fears of those who appear to head parts of these different religions as well. And this makes them deny a lot of the natural world for fear of their lack of understanding.
Right. And I could really get into this. I mean, that's a trail you can go down or not. But whenever you do go through this process, the founding fathers would call it apotheosis, where you are a knower. You don't understand the divine through another person anymore. You understand the divine within yourself. The Oracle of Delphi had written above her cave, "Man, know thyself, and you will know the worlds and their gods." Well, there are darker factions who do not want people to gain access to this information for the purposes of control. The Freemasons is a big group. It's a big group. Anybody who has done any research into the Freemasonic Lodge knows that they advocate most of their members joining churches or mosques or faiths of all different types. There's a reason for that. There's a very, very deliberate reason for that, and it's for the control of this information. And since I started teaching this stuff to people, I could tell you some stories, Chuck. I could tell you some stories that you would not believe. But there is a darker force that's been prevalent, that's tried to keep this information suppressed. Because what is a master mason?
Well, and even amongst themselves, let's just make something very clear too. Is even amongst themselves, there is an outer ring to that organization, which you see a lot of, like, say, businessmen and things, which are really just there to network. They're there as part of the fraternity. They actually do charitable acts, lots of things like that. But they are not part of the inner circle. The inner circle of those organizations is a wholly different animal, and this is where it does get a bit odd, and I'm curious to hear what you have to say about that.
It does get odd, and I don't want to. I'm not going to sit here and condemn every Freemason. I have family members that are Freemasons, but if I had to accept the title, it would probably be a Christian Heliosophian Gnostic. A Gnostic is a knower. And what we believe is that knowledge should be given freely for the betterment of, your neighbor. There's another sect which believes that knowledge is power. And the best way to really think about it is to think about the Jedi and the Sith, okay? Mm-hmm. And I make a lot of movie references because Jesus did the same thing. He used parables. If Jesus were walking around today, he would say, the kingdom of heaven is like the Matrix, right? But they didn't have that. So Hollywood is teaching you a lot of truth. And if you watch anything that George Lucas put out, he tells you, I didn't make that up. This is stuff I read from, the name of the book is The Hero's Journey, right? Mm-hmm. That you have these two factions that use this force or consciousness. Some use it for the purposes of evil, and some use it for the purposes of good. Most of your Freemasons who are in the higher levels do not want to pass out this knowledge. They don't believe. We can get to eugenics, but they believe that most of humanity is meant to rule. And Gnostics don't believe that. They believe in, what the Founding Fathers believed in.
Right, and this gets into the definition, of what they literally call the occult, because that is about the hidden knowledge.
Right.
We can even get into really what the definition of esoteric is if we wanted to, but the point is... Well, go ahead.
The word occult has a bad connotation to it. It just means that which is hidden, that which is secret. That's what the word occult means. It doesn't mean that which is evil, right? But, like most people, especially in our region of the country, when they hear the word occult, they automatically think, Satan worship and witchcraft and things like that. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that some of those sciences, and I do believe they are sciences, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that some of those sciences don't work, because I've personally seen a lot of things in my life. But it's how you use it. A gun is neutral. You can use it to defend somebody, or you can use it to kill somebody in cold blood. So,
no, absolutely. And another point to be made here is that very, very, very quickly people throw around the label Luciferianism. And this is really an inaccurate label. What they're talking about is, part of that hidden knowledge, part of that desire to control, part of that desire to dominate, which is not necessarily anything linked to the former angel of light, according to Scripture. This is a whole other sort of understanding. And this has always been a confusing sort of topic to try and dissect, because, people very much clutch to their, even when they're sort of aware, they sort of clutch to those original teachings, let's just say, what they should fear. Again, fear is the problem, and this is part of what the deal is here. That we can't dismiss this as simple Luciferianism. It's much deeper. It's much darker than that, actually. And that's not to say that there aren't people who literally do, are devil worshippers for sure. I mean, that exists. But to ascribe to them this level of power, this is not about that. Right. It's a whole other animal, as I said before. And listen, if anybody wants to join in, I'm not sure how many people are listening, but I do know that I have the phones available. I don't know if you want to take calls. Would you mind?
That's fine with me, man.
All right. Well, in the time we have left, I would welcome calls, which are at 718-717-8296. You can drop in there, or if you have me on your Skype list, I'll add you into the call. So I find this to be an extremely enlightening discussion. I'm sorry we haven't really concentrated on your book yet. I do want to get more into that, though. So in lieu of callers, I want to get deeper into that, but I didn't want to completely cut off where we were at with this, because I think this is a rather valuable sort of study. And to open one's mind to what is not necessarily canonized, or what is not necessarily endorsed by the organized religions, which one may find their faith sort of falling within, and to sort of understand better the natural world, and to embrace what has been, one way or another, God-given, is something that I think would be valuable for anyone, even if you take the smallest step, to understand, your body, your world, and the rest of the creatures around you, whether they be on 2 legs, 4 legs, or they be planted in the ground, my friends. We are all alive, and we are all part of this world. So let us try and remember that.
See, the beautiful thing is, you said we didn't really get into my book, but all of this stuff is in the book. It all is building the. Whenever I do research, I have to include it in my fiction. So we have been talking about the book. It's all in there. I mean, there's even references to how this control system came into existence in there, but you have to glean it. It's all written in parable. But, so it's all there. Trust me, we've been talking about the book.
Okay, well, like I said, I only sort of, got a glimpse of what's in there. And
Right.
I find it really fascinating because, again, it's more about the harmonic of what is. And I know I use that word a lot, but we're never going to understand what else we can discover until we can begin to understand ourselves. And that's very much like what you were talking about was at the Oracle of Delphi's cave there and all that. And this is something that has been passed down over and over and over again. And there's a reason why it has sustained itself over time, in my opinion, and that's because, look, the truth remains the truth, regardless of the time or the people that are living in it. So it appears to me as though we have a universal truth that has been translated over and over again. And as you said with the game of telephone, it seems as though some of the details have changed, but at the core, they are all still the same.
I would urge all your listeners, if you're interested in, and I'm going to go ahead and warn you, the path of enlightenment it can be a difficult one. You have to make a lot of sacrifices, and so you have to count the cost before you go to war. But a few of the things that I would really recommend is that all your listeners go out and pick up a book by Carl Jung, and his name is Carl, last name is Jung, called Man and His Symbols. And this book absolutely changed my life. It's almost, and I'm going to use a movie reference again because that's just what I do, but if you watch the end of The Matrix, when he finally becomes enlightened and he can see the code of the symbols that are being used all around him, and that's what allows him to be able to control the Matrix. This book will do that for him. Because if you stop and think about it, and when people who talk about reincarnation and past lives and remembering past lives, we have to remember something. The DNA that is in your body is the software for every ancestor that you ever had. That means that all their memories are inside of you. All of them. So when people remember past lives and things like that, what they're actually doing is accessing the memories that are in their DNA.
See, right? And again, this goes back throughout. If you look at, there's many references in the Bible to this, to remember your ancestors, to honor them, to realize that this is where you came from. There's a reason why ancestry is so important, in the storytelling there. And even again, in religions that pre-existed that book, they tell you that your ancestors are the reason for why many things occur. And this is, if you break it down scientifically, it makes a whole lot more sense, doesn't it? Because you're inheriting what your ancestors left behind for you physically. So, again, if we're all interconnected, then that means you're connected to everyone who ever lived as well.
That's exactly right. You got it right, Chuck.
There you go.
We all have within, and it's an amazing experience. Each of us have the memories encoded in all of our DNA of every human being that ever existed, and we have access to that knowledge if only we choose to seek it. It's like having Google in your head. There are people who talk about Ray Kurzweil and singularity. That stuff's already been done. You already have all that in your DNA. It's like a library in there, and the experience, for anybody who's ever went through what's called the Kundalini Rising or enlightenment, the experience is overwhelming at first, at the amount of knowledge that you have access to, and it takes a long time to incorporate it into your life, because when you start to remember, you start to have memories of things that were before your actual birth date. You have to say, okay, well, who am I? As an individual, who am I?
Right, now I'll throw a movie reference in here real quick. The Highlander, the quickening, in a way, is kind of what occurs. Not necessarily so melodramatic, but
right.
But this is what happens when enlightenment strikes you.
Right.
I've actually added in the guy who introduced you to me. Vince Easley, you there?
Hey, Chuck, Daniel, good to be on with you guys. I can't say enough about this book. I can say that it is tied together. It's a book that, for me, it really it tied together everything from all the old legends into all the stuff we're hearing about today, as far as possibilities of life beyond this earth, and from the Old Testament with the Nephilim and the crossing between angels and man, and from all the Greek and Roman mythology, and it's a completely unique book, one that I have really waited for somebody to write this book for a very, very long time. And let's see, about a couple of months ago, I guess Daniel sent me the synopsis and the first few chapters, and I couldn't wait to get that book. And it was incredible. I guarantee you, it's probably about the best book I've ever read, and it's completely original. The closest I could ever really get to, pairing it up with something would be like the very end of Battlestar Galactica, how the series ended, if anybody saw that. It's close, but not quite. I mean, that's the closest you could ever describe it, I guess. But, Daniel, I met him through Jason Patrick, who was embedded out in Bunkerville. He told me, he goes, "Man, you remind me of my friend Daniel," and he started telling me about some stuff, and from that point on, man, I started looking into Daniel's work, and I was hooked from then on. Incredible author.
Vincent, I am blushing and smiling from cheek to cheek. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'm glad we met through Patrick. Patrick is a good man. He's one of my personal heroes, and I appreciate
mine too. Absolutely.
Yeah, you guys, and what you see is what you get with that guy. You guys have no idea. You guys have no idea what an actual hero Jason Patrick is at heart. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. If it hadn't been for him, I probably wouldn't be talking to you right now. But that guy is doing some great work, and if there's anybody that really, really believes in everything that we're all doing, it's that guy right there. And
that's
much blessing to him. And I hope you guys pray for him every day and support everything that he does. He has a Bamboozer channel. It's Jason Patrick 11. I'm going to go ahead and plug him real quick. He also has a Facebook page called The Fight for Freedom Never Sleeps. And to do what he does, he needs funding. So if you guys, even $1, 50 cents, whatever you can do, throw some love to my boy Jason Patrick, because I'm telling you, he is going out to these places where news is happening. He's bringing it back to us, and we're able to present it to you so that we as a movement know what needs to be done next. So
that's right. He's putting himself, he's putting himself in the line of fire, and incredible guy. I did an interview with him. I've got some video of him. He and I spent a lot of time together out there, and he is a hero. I promise you that. He looks like George Clooney. So
he does, and
good-looking guy.
And I'm going to take credit for that, because I'm the one that started that. Until I said, "Man, you look like George Clooney," nobody ever thought that. So I take credit for that.
And I've got a video up on YouTube, and I start out with, "Hey, I'm Vince Easley, and I'm here with George Clooney." He busted up.
Well, hang on just a second, guys, because we got a caller, 478. You're on.
Hello, yes. I've actually read the book by Daniel Lewis, and I must say that book needs to be made into a movie. Yeah. I mean, I've read the Book of Enoch. Of course, I do have religious, maybe I wouldn't say necessarily a disagreement, because I'm not part of what we'd call organized religion. I do believe in the Messiah of Israel. I'm a true believer in the Son of the Lord. And I noticed that Daniel was speaking about DNA, and Mr. Ochelli was talking about the fact that DNA and ancestry, which really confirms the Bible's historic and accurateness as far as we all were represented by Adam and Eve. And then I remember Daniel saying something to the reference of that we weren't born or conceived in sin. But if Adam and Eve are our originators, then of course we would have that DNA. We would have part of that rebelliousness. And in Daniel's own words, he's rebellious by nature. Mm-hmm. So he's just admitted the very fact that the Bible is true, that God is true, and every man is technically wrong, is a liar. I mean, he's a great mind. I'm positive of that. I mean, his book and his storytelling, it's marvelous.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But I would say this. Yeshua was very rebellious by nature.
He was rebellious for the Talmudic Pharisees and Sadducees who were distorting the very word of the Almighty God and our Creator.
Then we agree.
I mean, of course he was. I mean, I don't believe that Yeshua was some gentle guy that, everyone says, oh, he's all lovey-dovey. No,
I'll tell you what.
He did call them vipers. He did call them snakes.
I'll tell you what. We agree that he was obedient. We agree that he was obedient to his father, but when it came to tyranny, he was very rebellious, and he did a good job. So I like to walk in those footsteps. But thank you so much. I'm glad that you read the novel, and I appreciate your kind words. Love you.
And sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, surely, Yeshua, but he was full of grace and truth. And he only said the truth, and it hurt the people that did not want to hear it. Because we're talking about an all-knowing, an all-powerful, an omniscient God, creator. And I love you. I mean, I'm pretty sure that he wouldn't just leave us with something that was so incomplete that we needed other things. I mean, really, an all-knowing and all-powerful God would do that to us?
Let me put it to you this way. Where I would disagree is the Buddhists have a term called terma, and essentially what this term means is that
in the Bible they call that sowing and reaping. You get what you get because that's what you gave.
Not karma, terma, T-E-R-M-A.
Oh, I got you.
Okay, what terma means in Buddhism is whenever any avatar or Christed person is chosen to deliver enlightenment to the people, over time that knowledge will be corrupted. So what the Buddhists developed was they said, okay, well, what we'll do is we'll take Buddha's teachings and we'll bury it. We'll bury it deep within the earth so that when God, Brahma, however you want to understand God.
How do you explain the rebirth of Yisrael, the nation of God, after 70 AD when Titus destroyed it and Israel was no longer a nation? And the Bible predicted in one day that Israel would become a nation.
I'd like to take that. I'd like to take that, please. Hold on just a minute. Okay, let me address that, because this is this is an idea that's come about since about the later 1800s, early 1900s. That at this 1948, this is even newer. That's when the fig tree blossomed. Okay, if you go back into Daniel, if you believe the Bible, the book of Daniel gives the prophecy of the 70 weeks. So, and it's agreed by historians and theologians that Christ entered into Jerusalem at the end of the 69th week. He was there for 3.5 years. A week is a 7-year period in prophecy, as most people would agree. Okay, so it was given unto Israel, it says, 70 weeks, or 69 weeks, and then the Messiah. Okay, so there's Jesus in his ministry for 3.5 years. He's killed, and then another 3.5 years pass. So, boom, there's the 70 weeks are gone.
I wouldn't say he was killed, he was martyred.
Hold on just a minute.
He said he gave his life. He said no man could take it from him.
Well, I'm not
so therefore he said
that.
he laid it down. And he was resurrected.
I'm arguing the point that religion has been manipulated to give these people in Israel that are non-Semitic this supposed right, a God-given holy land for these people to come to, displace other people.
Well, we can't even speak of the Palestinians. That was a political term invented. Absolutely. It goes back to Isaac and Ishmael. And as a prophecy,
I just want to jump in real quick here. There is a large difference between the political state of Israel, okay, and the prophesied return to the land of Israel. This is a different subject, and this has been kind of, and I find.
Well, we're just saying that the Bible is true. No matter, it doesn't matter if you think you're preconditioned to fulfill your own prophecy.
Well, can I jump in real quick?
Please.
I mean, Ukraine and Russia are both mentioned by different names in Ezekiel 38. Do we think that it's just some coincidence now that Ukraine and Russia is in the world news? Or are we just? I mean, are we that blind to what the Word of God really says?
This is what I would ask. I would ask, one, let's look at the name Israel. It's Isis, Ra, and El, which means Elohim, all which are signs of
Israel in the Hebrew language means he who strives with God. It doesn't say he who strives against God. It's he who strives with God. And the original name was Yaakov. And Yaakov is also a Hebrew name.
The word together does mean he who struggles with God. When you break it down, it's Isis,
now, with God,
Elohim, which were the last three religions of the last 3 ages. Mm-hmm. But what I would urge all the listeners to do is to look up a documentary on YouTube called The Other Israel, which documents unequivocally that the people who are in Israel.
We're just going to say that unequivocally you have African Americans, you have Italian Americans, and yes, you will have Russian Jews. You will have Ethiopian Jews. You will have Chinese Jews.
So
because that's where they were from, because God Himself, in the very Word of God, said that He was going to spread these people over the earth. And now they are being brought back miraculously by His power.
Let me ask you a question.
The real question is,
my question is this. Are the people who are in the nation state of Israel right now genetically related to Abraham?
Absolutely. Not every single one of them. That's like I was born in America. I have a lot of Cherokee Indian in me, but guess what? A lot of me is Irish. Do I have that DNA within me? Of course I do.
I have a second question. Can I ask a second question? Okay. I would like to know, when I take my trip to Israel, where I can visit the tomb of Solomon, King David, and Abraham.
Well, of course you would have to buy it. You'd have to get to the same field that Abraham bought where he buried his wife Sarah at. And Abraham himself was called out of Ur of the Chaldeans, which was Iraq. So technically Abraham was no Israelite himself. The nation of Israel was born from Abraham.
Abraham was an Egyptian.
That's not what the Bible says. It says he came from Ur of the Chaldeans. And if you look on your map, it's clearly in Iraq. I mean, every map, ancient or in history, will show you that that's where that was.
All right, let me ask you a question, okay? Since we're doing this. Okay.
But I'm not arguing. Actually,
you're good. No, intellectual dialogue is good.
No, I find this really interesting, actually, yeah.
I'm glad you do, because I'm pretty sure Daniel knows who this is.
Yeah.
And I love you.
I love you too, man. Do you believe that what the nation of Israel is doing to the Palestinians who have been in that land for 2,000 plus years is morally correct? I mean, we're talking
what they are doing to them right now.
Yeah,
I would clearly say that if you were shooting an AK-47 into my house, I would throw grenades at you, my friend. So yes, if Hamas, who repeatedly will not agree to a ceasefire,
do you know that
Israel itself has agreed 5 times to a ceasefire?
You're aware that Hamas was created by Mossad, the Israeli government?
Mm-hmm.
Guess what?
They
I
created.
used to be an alcoholic and a crackhead. You going to judge me on my past?
No. Just like the CIA created Al Qaeda and controls it. Mossad created Hamas and still controls it.
And Iran or Iraq funds Hamas, and guess who funds them? America. And they're the ones that are constantly shooting rockets. And a land no bigger than metropolitan Atlanta. I mean, let's be real.
Did you like my book?
Come on, it needs to be made a movie, bro.
All right, thanks.
I mean, I even tell the people at work they need to read your book.
Yeah, well, it is what it is. It is what it is. Here's what I don't agree with: violence. Period. I don't care if you're supposed to be God's chosen people or not. If you're God's chosen people, you're not supposed to be using violence. What you ought to do is take the advice.
We know they're just defending themselves. If they stop shooting rockets,
you're invading. They're invading Gaza. It's not self-defense.
If Hamas stopped firing rockets, there would be peace. If Israel stopped protecting themselves, there would be no Israel.
You really believe that this is
their whole charter is to destroy Israel? And why is that? Even their own soldiers say their God is the one that is diverting their rockets they fire into them. That's the only protection they have. Let me, okay. I've got an apple in my hand. Is this apple sweet or is this apple tart? Can you tell me that?
Well, I can't personally know.
Why not?
Because I don't know. I'm not there.
You haven't tasted it. So I ask you to taste God at His Word from the Holy Bible and see that He is good. Just try it. And God bless you, and I love you. All right, Daniel. All right, Ochelli, you have a great night.
Thank you so much for calling in. Really appreciate you. And, I can't say enough, man. I really appreciate this guy's book and what he's talking about here. And you're probably right. From all what I can hear, it does need to be made into a movie.
Amen.
I appreciate that. You guys rock.
Take care now.
See? I told you, certain circles. I love that guy, though. I knew who he was. That's a good guy.
No, I you know what, and I can hear it in him, but it's just, it's one of these things where I got to be honest with you, I cannot be in support of what goes on there. I don't care what the justification is.
No, and like I was saying, I would right now I would ask all your readers to get on YouTube. It's going to be a tough pill to swallow. And the reason it's going to be a tough pill to swallow is because most of your organized churches scare the living hell out of you and say, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. But you're going to have to get over that. And what you're going to have to do is honestly look at the situation. I would urge everybody to look up a documentary, and I don't agree with everything that's in it. However, it is very, very well documented, and there's a lot of good information, but it's called The Other Israel. You need to look that documentary up, and what this documentary does unequivocally is it says that the people who are in the nation-state of Israel right now, as we speak, are Russian. They're not genetically connected to the tribes of Israel at all.
Right, the so-called Ashkenazi or...
Khazars.
There you go. Yeah, and here's the problem, is that, like you said, though, there is, again, within organized religion, there is a teaching that this is a requirement of your faith, that if you don't back Israel, then you are against the church, therefore against God's plan, therefore against God's people, etc., etc. And I've heard this many, many times, and you can't budge some people from that.
Yeah, and that gets back into what we were talking about with prophecy. Whenever you continue, I mean, you have an issue in especially Protestant forms of Christianity that's called dispensationalism that was created about 150 years ago by a guy named James Nelson Darby that proposes this false form of a pre-tribulation rapture, and that Israel had to become a nation, and, after that happens, and I guess, Jewish carpenter is going to come back on a horse, and good people are going to get their heads cut off, and all this good stuff. And whenever you go back and you start reading, what some of antiquity says, they didn't believe any of that. None of it. So we have to evaluate what's being told to us from the pulpits. And this is, that conversation was a good example of that, because look, that type of conditioning that says, okay, Israel can do no wrong because Israel is going to do what God has divinely inspired, allows somebody who believes in the Prince of Peace to advocate genocide. And I'm sorry, but that is what's happening in Gaza.
But that is exactly what it is. I mean, the nation-state of Israel at this point, and I say this unequivocally, and I don't really care who doesn't like it, controls the largest open-air concentration camp in the world.
Right.
And this is nothing that you can't dispute this. And even when I read a story earlier this week, and I read it on the air to make this point, that there were all these, supposed attacks from these Hamas, agents that they couldn't really identify, but that's where they assumed they had come from. And these rocket attacks had occurred, and there was one injury or one death, I forget which, at this point. And the so-called retaliation, left 30, 40 people dead.
Right.
And this is not, this went by without even really notice in any media that I saw, with the exception of a couple of articles, and I think about a 5-minute blurb on one of the mainstream news channels.
Right.
I'd like to interject that this is exactly describes the title of tonight's show, The Darker Side of Religion. And people are so emotional, and like you're saying, they're so conditioned, and fail to go back and study history and the founding of these denominations, where all this came from. And we see the culmination of today of a two-headed beast between the United States and Israel, that is the military-industrial complex that is dominating the world, has caused more wars and death and destruction than any other time in history. It's ridiculous. And you see the emotion in this guy. And it goes contrary to, if you want to believe the Bible, you better, believe it. Don't take these interpretations. When the fig tree blossoms and begins to put forth fruit in 1948, Israel became a state because the British set it up for that. Now, they wanted to take control of that area. They set this up. And like we said, these white people over here, they're calling themselves the Semitic Jews, are Eastern European Khazars. Maybe they converted way back then. So okay, I'm not anti-Jewish. I'm certainly not anti-Semitic, but I am anti-Israel and anti-United States and what they're doing, and it's criminal. And anybody else, if it was some other country doing this, we'd be all like, we got to go, to take down Nazi Germany, and it's crazy.
And at some point, rational minds have to be able to come to a conclusion on this issue. It's for the past few years, and there used to be a time where I was so afraid to speak out against Israel. But whenever you look at the footage on the internet of what they're doing to women and children, my God doesn't do that. It doesn't do that. My God doesn't do what America is doing to women and children in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iraq. You're not going to sit there. One of the things that really got me out of organized religion was after 9/11. I'm sitting here reading about the Prince of Peace, and he says, love everybody. He doesn't say love people that believe exactly like you believe. The story of the Good Samaritan should be an example to all of us, that you have people of two different faiths, and one shows compassion to the other. And after 9/11 happened, I was hearing from pulpits that this was God's will, and Muslims were all demon-possessed, right? And then you look at the bodies on the streets, and you go, how can a 6-year-old be demon-possessed? Because they were born into an Islamic family, you know. And it's sad. It's a sad state of affairs, and it has to come to an end. It really, really does.
And what is more demonic by nature than to commit acts of genocide against innocent populations? You know, not everyone who has been killed in these conflicts is an enemy combatant. Okay, this is exactly the problem. And this is why I get myself in trouble for saying this, because, again, I identified myself as someone who is not a Christian, but I do often say that I really wish that people would behave in a more Christ-like manner as opposed to being Christian.
Thank you. Amen.
And if they did, I think that we wouldn't be looking at these these memes about holy wars and all these things that still exist. There are plenty of people out there who essentially feel as though, the entire Arab world is against us because, they hate our freedoms. I mean, this is still believed by a great many people. And it makes my heart heavy in a way that this is the justification.
I'd like to...
Go ahead.
I'd like to make a closing statement. I'm going to jump out and go post up for after the last cup. I'd like to say that whether you think the Earth is 6,000 or 6 billion years old, this has been going on. People have been squabbling about trying to define God and put him in a box. I think it's well time that people need to say, look, I mean, how can anybody define God? We can't make anybody believe other than what they believe. So let everybody believe as they will. And right. I think the responsibility now lies for God to approve. I'm just stumbling over my words here. I'm so just dumbfounded by how people are, and then they would think that it's okay to kill somebody in the name of God, and that's not the God that I know.
It's very appropriate.
Not.
It's very appropriate that you say that, Vincent. The Buddhists have a term that says that God is ineffable, which means undescribable, unknowable. There's no words to describe it. But clearly, a God of harmonious creation would not allow violence in this way. In what's going on in Israel or the world, and this country. I'm so thankful that not too long ago, I think it was in 2007, 2008, the Dalai Lama actually went to the steps of Congress. And I think everybody really needs to look this up. But he took a broom, and he performed something called the Kali Chakra ceremony, which was to induct this country into a state of enlightenment, because the Dalai Lama understood that at the end of the day, a lot of the world's woes are in Washington, D.C. And that's why I think that what all of us are doing is so important, because the Dalai Lama did. And we have to come to a place where we adopt something called the law of acceptance, which is, I don't have to understand God with the definition or the rituals that you do. All I have to do is accept your right to do it in such a way. And in return, I would ask the same. That's why we have a First Amendment in this country. You have the freedom of expression to worship the divine in your own way. And I think that it probably would be best for everybody in this movement to break away from organized religion and church. I would look up work by Jordan Maxwell. He says a lot of stuff about the word church, which actually comes from an ancient Gaelic goddess called Circe. And what she would do is she would build a house and tell a fairy tale and lure men and women into her house and cannibalize them. So to me, that's organized religion. So don't be religious, be spiritual. Love each other.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Correct.
Some things are obvious, and that is love. And if you are If you're harming somebody else or you're forcing somebody else, if it in fact God exists and He gave man the right to self-determination for free will, then no man has the right to tell another how he should live or believe, as long as there is non-aggression. So, hey, love and peace, y'all. Thanks, Chuck. Daniel, it's great to be on with you. I love your work, and you and I'll be catching up again soon. So, hey, take care, y'all.
I appreciate it, man. I look forward to me and you getting together.
Right on, brother. Bye.
All right, man. Namaste.
Absolutely. Namaste.
Well, I've got to say this, that regardless of how you or I or anyone else sees the universe, regardless of how you or I agree or disagree about the nature of God, there is no reason why we cannot all coexist within that universe. There is no reason why any of us needs to do harm to one another based on the beliefs that we seem to be picking up on. Men are very small creatures, and God, no matter how you see him, has to be much larger than the average man. So it is, to my mind, that the complete understanding of God is something that is outside of the realm of the average man. And to kill or to maim or to do harm to one another based on a belief system which is not your own, it is one you have adopted, especially through the organized churches. And I'm glad you brought up Cersei, because that was where I was going with. I was going to get into that about the definition of the word church, about the misuse of it in the texts, and all of that. And I'm glad you brought it up. You actually said it in a much more concise way than I was going to, and I appreciate that. But the thing is,
brother.
Yeah, listen, it's beautiful, man. It's definitely something that I would encourage anybody who's listening to us, give it a try. The worst thing that'll happen is you'll waste a little bit of time, but I guarantee you, if you try to elevate your consciousness just a bit, and you can get up there just a little bit more, one thing is for certain: no matter how you see God or the God consciousness or the Christ consciousness, if you get even a fraction of an inch closer to it, you will definitely feel what I call elation. So,
well, what I would say is this: and this is something that I take very, very seriously. I believe that karma is a currency, and one of the best ways, if you really, really want to get connected to the divine, if you really want to experience God on a personal level and not just be told, is somebody once told me, do one good deed every day. And I looked at him and I said, why limit yourself to that? Why don't you tomorrow, wake up and do countless good deeds, expecting nothing in return, and see what happens for you. See how the universe or how God will reciprocate that charity, that unabashed love for other people. Do that. It really does work, and I'm telling you, I've seen phenomenal things in my own life just by doing it, and it makes it a better place. Everybody's hurting, at some point in their life. So if you can be an angel to somebody, why not?
Well, absolutely, and we're just about 10 minutes left here. I just want to let you know these 2 hours have really flown by, and I really appreciate your time, sir. And you're just a great mind, and I'm anxious to check out your writing a little more. I've looked at some of the stuff on zeninthecar.com. Really interesting articles. Not everything is religion on there, by the way, folks. There's some very interesting political commentary there by Mr. Crumpton as well, and an interesting personal story in 2 parts. That was the first thing that caught my eye, which was rather fascinating. And I dropped a link earlier in chat for you guys, and hopefully you'll go check it out at zeninthecar.com. I think that's all one word.
Mm-hmm.
And your book, which is available on Amazon, is called Then Came the Flood. Right?
That's right.
And I'm sure there's going to be more. This is rather intricate, and we didn't even get into the story arc. We didn't get into the characterizations in the book or anything else, because I really was kind of stuck on the fact that your bio says something about being a philosopher, and I kind of wanted to test that a little bit.
Well, how'd I do?
Sir, you came through much better than I thought you could possibly come through, and I'm really, really delighted and grateful that you're on the air with me. And I hope that people do look into your work, whether it be on the net or they go and pick up that book. It is available in paperback. It's available, well, it's in softback, it says, and hardcover, as well as electronic. There are ebooks of it as well.
Right. And I appreciate that. And I'll tell you what, you go ahead and read the book, have me back on, and then we'll have a very in-depth discussion. But before I do go, I do want to say this. I know I plugged Jason Patrick's stuff on Bamboozer and his Facebook page, which is The Fight for Freedom Never Sleeps. But I also want you guys to check out Sabrina Black. She writes at divineamerica.com. And Curtis Sermons also writes for Iraq Veterans Against the War. And like we've been discussing here, most of the crew, each and every one of us, come from different spiritual beliefs. And the reason that we are structured that way is because we are trying to set an example to show everyone else that you don't have to believe exactly the same way to enact change in our country and in our world. And I hope that if there's anything that your listeners take away from this interview, it's that.
Well, absolutely, and I'm fond of referring to something that someone imparted to me not too long ago, but it's really one of the most brilliant things I've ever heard said, and I repeat it often because I think the message is extremely valuable, and I'm sure you'll agree with it. Really, in the world, it boils down to two emotions. There are two emotions that seem to dictate just about everything in the world. They are fear and love.
Right.
And when one chooses to not accept fear, to disavow fear, when one chooses to embrace love, the world is definitely a better place. And love is also one of those things that love includes acceptance. Love includes mercy. Love includes, what you call charity. Love is a lot of things, but it really boils down to those two things. And
sounds like you're channeling Bill Hicks, brother.
little bit, but the truth is the truth, and I don't care if it came out of the mouth of Jesus or it came out of the mouth of Bill Hicks. It does not matter. The world is as it is, and the truth is still the truth. And there's not much more I can say besides that. But I do want to thank you one more time. And yes, I will.
Hey, I did. And let me say this real quick before I run off. I'm down here in Panama City with my friend Rod, and I did want to go ahead and mention him. Rodimus, I call him Rodimus Prime, right? But we were talking about it today after he found out I was coming on the show. And he said, what you really, really ought to leave them with is this quote. I said, what's that? He said, I don't know who it was by. I had to look it up later. It was Voltaire. But he said, if you can get people to believe absurdities, you can get them to commit atrocities.
Yes, sir. Right? Yes, sir.
So with that, after I sign off, I'm going to leave you a link for Radiohead's The Present Tense. I hope everybody listens to that song and meditates on what it means. And I really appreciate you having me on, Chuck.
Listen, thank you again, sir, and that is all correct. I got to tell you, the quote from Voltaire, I thought I was going to have a little bit of an argument with you, but it turns out you and I see things rather the same.
what I got to ask, how come?
Well, I just thought that there might be a little more of a dogmatic approach, let's just say, to some of the things you were referencing. And what I found is that somebody could embrace that and also be enlightened. And this is a rarity, sir. So know this. I've talked to a lot of people in my time. I've interviewed tons and tons of people for different purposes. Not so many on the radio, but quite a few on the radio. And I got to say that you're one of the most interesting and evolved people that I have seen. And I use that word guardedly again, but really, it's been a serious delight and a pleasure to speak with you tonight. And I'm so glad that I did.
No, it's been a pleasure, man, because I'm not even used to people being as enlightened as you, and even having the grasp of these concepts. You know, before I came on the show, I'm like, okay, what's my threshold? You know what I mean? I almost messaged Vince, and I was like, all right, dude, what level is he on? I don't know. You know, I don't know. Can I go with David Icke? Or you know what I'm saying? But you're already there. I can already tell you're in David Icke land, man.
You know, people keep telling me that.
Hey,
I do appreciate it. I do appreciate it, sir. I gotta say.
I could tell you some stories about that, but we'll save that for a different time.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do another show. That's a guarantee. So,
just let you know, man. And I'm gonna go ahead and jump off and let you wrap out. And thank you. God bless you. Namaste. And any other spiritual blessing I could put on you, brother. Keep going.
And peace be with you, sir. And keep doing what you're doing.
No problem.
Anyway, guys, I gotta say that was definitely enjoyable, and I do advise you to go check out his book. I am going to read it, and I'm telling you now, I don't get into too many books anymore, especially that are that are non-history books. You guys know that. But this guy's work I've got to check out, because man, the story that's got to come out of it. When somebody is this enlightened and this spiritual, has got to be instructional to me. And I've always said that regardless of what your viewpoints are, you can always learn something from just about anyone. And I'm willing to bet that as I read through this gentleman's book, and as those of you who decide to pick it up read it, I'm very sure you're going to learn something. And not just something, but probably a bunch of somethings. And that's about the best thing I can say. And also check out the zeninthecar.com, because I'm telling you, that's an interesting website. And I noticed written along the side of it, it says evolution is revolution. And if you take that, not necessarily at the face value that you're supposed to, according to a lot of belief systems, but if you take it at its essence, I think that the people that decide to listen to me on a weekly basis will totally understand where that comes from, and will find that website rather useful, and I'm glad I discovered that as well. And I got to thank Vince Easley again, because he put me in touch with this gentleman, and real honestly, I wasn't quite sure where we were going, but when I read that he had studied many of the texts which were not included in the King James Version of the Bible, I got to say, that definitely grabbed me. And the fact that he described himself as a philosopher, well, guess what? There's some truth in labeling sometimes. And like I said, I'm definitely going to pick up this guy's book. And I'm kind of really interested in what's going to happen with the one with the Tower of Babel on the cover, because that is one of those really fascinating subjects as far as I'm concerned, how things have been confounded through language. And of course, the hidden history of the world is definitely something that you all know that I'm interested in, not just in the United States, but world history. It has been redacted, it has been controlled, and the more that we open up our minds, the more we become self-aware, the greater the possibilities are for ourselves and for our future generations. And without any sort of question, I want to thank everybody for listening tonight. And if you're picking this up later on down the line, I appreciate it also. And, everybody in the chat room, sorry I didn't really go to too much. After the last couple of tests,
Webcam microphone up close. Webcam microphone up close.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was
but I have the files. You know, I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, that guy, how can that be possible? You know, pistols and fondle slap of choice. I don't know when that was. It doesn't really matter. Internet, professional wrestlers, and not Jesse Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from as long as it's real. It doesn't. It's hard to get real information because seriously, they don't want you to have just read two sources whenever I try